Welcome to another episode of the English Pod community. I'm Blake, your host, and today we have a great episode to help you stay motivated while learning English. If you've ever felt stuck or unsure about your progress, this episode is for you. By listening to real-life stories and examples, you'll not only improve your listening skills, but also get tips that can help with your writing and fluency. So make sure to hit the like button if you find this episode helpful. Now, let's get started. Do you ever find it difficult to stay motivated while learning English? Maybe you've tried studying every day but feel like you're not improving fast enough. Or perhaps you're wondering if your effort is even paying off. You're not alone. Many learners face these challenges. But today, I'm going to share some powerful ways to stay motivated and keep your progress steady. I remember when I was learning a new language myself. It was a long journey, and at one point I felt really discouraged. But then I realized something important. Motivation isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. Let me tell you about a time when I almost gave up. A few years ago, I decided to learn Spanish. I started with enthusiasm, but after a few weeks I began to lose interest. The words were difficult to remember, and I wasn't seeing much improvement. Then I remembered something my friend Mark told me. If you want to improve, you need to make learning fun and practical. So I started listening to Spanish podcasts and watching videos in Spanish about topics I loved, like cooking. That small change made a huge difference. Not only did I enjoy learning more, but my speaking and listening skills improved too. So, what can you do to stay motivated while learning English? Here are 3 simple steps that worked for me. First, set small, achievable goals. For example, instead of aiming to be fluent in a month, focus on learning 5 new words every week. It's a lot easier to feel motivated when you see progress, no matter how small. Next, make your learning fun and interesting. Don't just study grammar rules. Listen to podcasts, watch videos, or read about topics that excite you. If you enjoy the process, it won't feel like a chore. For instance, last year I started listening to an English podcast about cooking. Even though it was challenging, I found myself excited to learn new vocabulary and phrases related to food. It felt more like a hobby than a task. Finally, don't compare your progress to others. Everyone learns at their own pace. Just because your friend can speak English fluently doesn't mean you're behind. It's important to focus on your personal journey and celebrate your victories along the way. I also want to share a story from my own experience. A few months ago, I spoke with a student named Julia, who was feeling frustrated about her English learning journey. She'd been studying for a year but felt like her speaking skills hadn't improved much. We talked about her study habits, and she realized she had been focusing only on grammar exercises. We agreed that she should spend more time speaking and listening to real conversations. After just a few weeks of practicing speaking with a language partner and listening to podcasts, she told me her confidence in speaking had grown so much. Remember, learning a language isn't just about memorizing words or grammar rules. It's about connecting with people and enjoying the process. If you focus on the journey and enjoy each step, you'll stay motivated and see real progress. Let's talk about consistency for a moment. Many learners stop practicing because they feel like they're not improving quickly enough. But here's the truth. Language learning is all about consistency. It's not about studying for hours every day. It's about making small, steady progress over time. I remember talking to my friend Tom, who had been learning English for a year. At first, he felt like his progress was slow, but when we looked back at his journey, he realized he had improved more than he thought. He had learned hundreds of new words and could hold basic conversations with ease. What helped him the most was making English a part of his daily routine. He practiced for just 15 minutes every day, but that small habit made all the difference. So, if you're feeling discouraged, try this. Make a commitment to practice English every day, even if it's just for a short time. Maybe you can spend 10 minutes listening to an English podcast like this one, or write a few sentences in English every morning. Small actions, done consistently, add up. Another powerful way to stay motivated is by finding a language partner or group. Let me tell you about my friend Sarah. She was learning English on her own for months, but she was feeling stuck. One day, she decided to join an online language exchange group. She was paired with a woman named Emma, who was learning English just like Sarah. They started practicing together twice a week, and it made learning so much more fun. Sarah told me that speaking with Emma gave her the confidence to try new words and phrases, and hearing Emma make mistakes helped her feel less worried about making her own. It was a supportive, friendly environment where they both could grow. Having someone to practice with can make a huge difference. If you don't have a language partner, try joining a language exchange group online, or even look for an English-speaking friend who is willing to help you. The more you speak and listen, the better your skills will become. Another tip I always give to learners is to keep track of your progress. A lot of people forget how far they've come. One of my students, John, showed me how he used to write down all the new words he learned each week. He also kept a journal in English. Over time, when he looked back at his journal, he was amazed at how much he had written. Seeing his improvement helped him stay motivated. John told me that it felt rewarding to read his older entries and realize that even though he didn't notice it at the time, his English was improving. You can do the same. Keep a simple notebook or a digital document where you track your progress. Write about your day in English, record new vocabulary, or even reflect on your feelings and thoughts in English. When you see your growth, you'll feel proud and motivated to continue. And let's not forget about setting a goal. This can be a huge factor in staying motivated. I remember when my friend Jack wanted to improve his English speaking skills. He set a goal to speak with an English speaker for 30 minutes every week. At first, he was nervous, but as the weeks went on, he felt more comfortable. That goal kept him on track and gave him something to look forward to. It doesn't matter how big or small your goal is, as long as it's meaningful to you. If you don't know where to start, you can set a simple goal like, I want to learn 10 new words this week, or I want to be able to introduce myself in English without hesitating. The key is to make sure the goal is specific and achievable. You'll feel a sense of accomplishment when you reach it, and that sense of success will keep you motivated. Another thing I always tell learners is to celebrate every victory, no matter how small it may seem. When I was learning, I used to get frustrated when I couldn't express exactly what I wanted to say in English. But one day, I realized something important. Every time I could use a new word or phrase, it was a success. Even if it was just a small achievement, like understanding a new podcast or writing a short story, I celebrated it. I knew those small victories were adding up. So, when you make progress, whether it's understanding a new word or speaking with a friend, take a moment to recognize that achievement. Pat yourself on the back and remember that every step forward counts. If you've been learning English for a while, you may have already experienced the ups and downs of the learning process. Sometimes everything seems to be going well. You can understand most of the conversation, and you're able to express yourself easily. But then, there are other times when you feel like you're not making any progress. Maybe you struggle with remembering words, or maybe your speaking skills don't feel as strong as you'd like. Let me tell you about my friend David. He's been learning English for a few years, but there was a time when he almost gave up. He felt like his English wasn't improving fast enough, and he found himself comparing his skills to others who seemed to speak English perfectly. But then David realized something important. He was focusing too much on the results, and not enough on the process. Once he shifted his focus to enjoying the journey, things started to change. David started to practice more, not because he had to, but because he enjoyed it. He joined a local conversation group where he could practice English with people from different countries. Slowly but surely, his confidence grew, and his English improved. David's story reminds me of something very important when it comes to learning a language. It's not just about focusing on the destination. It's about enjoying the process and the small steps along the way. If you're feeling stuck, like David was, try to change your perspective. Focus on the little things. Celebrate when you learn a new word or when you understand a sentence that you couldn't before. These little victories will keep you motivated and help you see how much progress you're actually. Sometimes motivation can feel like something that comes and goes, right? One day you're motivated to study for hours, and the next day you don't feel like doing anything at all. This is very normal. Even the most dedicated learners experience these highs and lows. What matters is that you don't let the low days stop you. One of the best ways to stay motivated is to build habits that will help you keep going on those days when you don't feel like studying. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I decided to start running every morning. At first, I was excited about it, but after a couple of weeks, I was feeling tired and didn't want to go outside. But I realized something important. Motivation wasn't going to get me out the door every day. What got me out the door was the habit I had built. I had made running a part of my routine, so even when I didn't feel motivated, I still went out for a run. Over time, this habit became automatic, and it didn't require much thought or effort to do. The same goes for learning English. If you create small, consistent study habits, you won't need to rely on motivation alone. Whether it's listening to a podcast every morning, writing a few sentences every night, or reading an article in English during your lunch break, these small actions will build up over time and keep your progress steady. Let's talk about goals for a moment. Setting goals can be an incredible motivator, but sometimes we set goals that are too big, which can lead to disappointment when we don't reach them quickly. I've learned that breaking big goals into smaller, achievable steps can make all the difference. For example, last year I set a goal to improve my speaking skills in French. Instead of aiming to become fluent within a few months, I set a smaller goal: to have a 10-minute conversation in French every week. This smaller goal made it easier to stay motivated because I could see immediate results. After a few months, I was having 30-minute conversations without even thinking about it. When you set goals, try to make them specific and realistic. Instead of saying, "I want to speak perfect English," try setting a goal like, "I want to be able to introduce myself confidently in English," or "I want to understand 80% of the conversation in my favorite podcast." These smaller, more achievable goals will help you stay on track and give you something to celebrate every time you reach them. Now, I want to share a quick story about my friend Lucy. Lucy is a dedicated English learner, but a few months ago, she felt like she wasn't improving. She was spending a lot of time studying grammar, but her speaking and listening skills didn't seem to get any better. We had a chat, and I asked her, "What do you enjoy doing outside of studying?" She mentioned that she loved cooking, so I suggested that she start listening to English cooking podcasts and watching cooking videos in English. At first, she was hesitant because she didn't think it would help her English. But after a few weeks, Lucy was amazed by how much her vocabulary had grown. She could understand recipes, cooking techniques, and even talk about her favorite meals in English. The point here is that when you can connect your learning with something you're passionate about, it doesn't feel like studying anymore. It feels fun. So if you have a hobby or an interest, try to learn English through it. Whether it's sports, traveling, reading, or even gardening, there are English resources out there that can make your learning experience more enjoyable. Another important thing to keep in mind is to stay patient. Language learning is not something that happens overnight. It takes time. I remember when I first started learning English, I would get frustrated when I couldn't say things the way I wanted to. But I've learned that patience is key. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will become. You will make mistakes, and that's okay. Mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. In fact, they're a sign that you're pushing yourself and trying new things. So when you make a mistake, don't be hard on yourself. Learn from it and keep moving forward. A few months ago, one of my students, Emma, was practicing speaking with me, and she made several mistakes. At first, she was embarrassed, but I reminded her that mistakes were just part of the learning process. We both laughed about it, and by the end of the conversation, she was speaking with more confidence. Emma's story shows us that making mistakes doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're learning and growing. And finally, I want to mention that learning English is a journey that is different for everyone. Some people learn faster, while others take longer. But the important thing is to stay focused on your own progress. Celebrate your victories, big or small, and remember that every day you study is a step closer to fluency. I want to talk about something that I think is super important for long-term success in learning a language: the power of routine. Many people, when they first start learning English, are super motivated. They want to learn everything quickly, and they dive into studying all at once. But eventually, the excitement fades, and they may start skipping study sessions or feel discouraged. This is very normal, but it doesn't mean you should give up. The key here is to build a routine that works for you. Let me tell you about my friend Ben. Ben was really excited when he first started learning English, but after a few weeks, he lost motivation because he was trying to study for long hours. He would sit at his desk for 2 or 3 hours at a time, trying to memorize vocabulary and study grammar rules. This didn't work for Ben because it was too overwhelming. After talking to me about it, he decided to change his approach. Instead of studying for long hours, he broke his learning into shorter sessions of 20 minutes a day. In the morning, he would spend 20 minutes listening to an English podcast. After lunch, he would take another 20 minutes to write a short diary entry in English. At night, before bed, he would read an article in English for 20 minutes. This small change made a big difference for Ben. The routine was manageable, and he was able to do it every day without feeling stressed. Over time, he noticed a huge improvement in his speaking and writing skills. What really helped him was the fact that he wasn't trying to study for hours. Instead, he was just committing to a few small habits every day. And as we know, small actions, when done consistently, add up over time. If you're feeling like Ben did, overwhelmed by how much you think you need to learn, try breaking it down into smaller chunks. Start with short, manageable study sessions and make them a part of your daily life. Whether it's listening to an English podcast during breakfast or reviewing vocabulary while you wait for the bus, small moments of practice can lead to big improvements. Now, let's talk about something that can sometimes be a little difficult to handle: motivation slumps. We all experience them. One day you feel like you're on top of the world, and the next day you just don't want to pick up your notebook. It happens to everyone, even the most dedicated learners. But the good news is that there are ways to push through these slumps. One strategy is to remind yourself why you started learning English in the first place. Maybe you want to travel and be able to speak with locals. Maybe you want to advance your career and communicate better at work. Maybe you simply enjoy the challenge of learning a new language. Whatever your reason is, remind yourself of it when things get tough. I have a friend named Carol, and she shared a story with me that I think many of you can relate to. Carol has been learning English for a few years now, but she told me that last year she went through a period where she just didn't feel motivated. She was busy with work, and there were days when she didn't feel like studying at all. Carol decided to write down her why she was learning English in the first place. She put it on a piece of paper and stuck it on the wall in her office. Every time she felt discouraged, she would look at that paper and remind herself of her goals. That simple reminder gave her the push she needed to keep going. Carol also tried something else that helped her stay motivated during tough times. She started learning English in a more relaxed, fun way. Instead of sitting down to study from a textbook every day, She started reading English blogs on topics she was passionate about. She also began watching cooking videos in English because she loves cooking. Soon, she was hearing new words and phrases that were relevant to her interests, which made learning feel more enjoyable. When you tie your learning to something you already love, it doesn't feel like work anymore. It becomes part of your life. Speaking of enjoying your learning, have you ever tried learning English by immersing yourself in the language? Immersion doesn't mean you need to live in an English-speaking country. You can create your own mini immersion experience at home. I remember a time when I decided to immerse myself in French, and I didn't have the option of going to France at the time. Instead, I surrounded myself with the language in small ways. I set my phone to French, listened to French podcasts, and followed French-speaking accounts on social media. Even though I wasn't living in a French-speaking country, I felt like I was constantly surrounded by the language. This really helped me stay motivated and improved my fluency. You can do something similar with English. Set your phone to English, change the language on your social media accounts, or follow English-speaking influencers who share topics you're interested in. The more you surround yourself with English, the more natural it will feel to use it. This kind of immersion is a great way to build your listening and speaking skills without feeling like you're forcing yourself to study. Next, I want to talk about the importance of using English in real-life situations. It's easy to get stuck in a learning bubble where you study grammar rules and memorize vocabulary, but at some point you need to practice using what you've learned. I know this can feel intimidating for many learners, especially when they're just starting to feel confident in their skills. But let me tell you a secret. Making mistakes is okay. It's actually a good thing. When you make mistakes, it means you're trying, and the more you try, the faster you'll improve. A friend of mine named Mark told me that when he was learning English, he was very shy about speaking. He was afraid of making mistakes, so he would only speak English when he felt completely sure of what he was saying. This made him hesitant to practice with native speakers, and it slowed down his progress. One day, he decided to join a conversation group where everyone was there to learn and practice, and it was a game changer for him. He realized that the more he spoke, the more comfortable he became. And the best part? His mistakes were corrected by others in a friendly, supportive way. Mark started speaking more freely, and his confidence grew. If you can find a conversation partner, whether it's in person or online, you'll get valuable practice in real-life situations. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. The more you practice, the easier it will get. If you're unable to find a conversation partner, start by practicing speaking English in front of a mirror. It may feel a little awkward at first, but it's a great way to start getting comfortable with speaking. Along with practicing speaking, listening is just as important. I always tell my students that listening is one of the best ways to improve your speaking skills. Why? Because when you listen to native speakers, you get used to the rhythm, pronunciation, and natural flow of the language. It's like learning the melody of a song. The more you listen, the easier it becomes to speak. Let me tell you a story about my friend Julia. Julia had been learning English for about 6 months, but she still struggled with understanding fast conversations. She decided to start listening to English audiobooks during her commute to work. She chose stories that were interesting to her, adventure novels, and listened to them in English. At first, she couldn't understand everything, but after a few weeks, she noticed that she was catching more and more words. Eventually, Julia was able to follow the entire story without any trouble. She was amazed by how much better her listening skills had become. So, make listening a regular part of your learning routine. Whether it's listening to podcasts, audiobooks, or watching videos in English, try to expose yourself to different accents and speaking styles. The more you listen, the more you'll understand, and the better your speaking will become. This leads us to the final point, having patience with your journey. learning English takes time, and progress isn't always linear. Some days you'll feel like you're moving forward, and other days it might feel like you're not improving at all. But remember, even on the days when it feels like you're not making progress, you are. Every day you practice, even if it's just a little bit, is one step closer to your goal. Celebrate the small wins and don't get discouraged by the setbacks. To sum it all up, motivation is a combination of building good habits, setting realistic goals, staying patient, and enjoying the process. Stay consistent with your practice. Find ways to make learning fun and remember to celebrate every step forward. Keep pushing yourself, and before you know it, you'll be speaking English with confidence and fluency. When it comes to motivation, let's look at something I like to call the power of small wins. It's so easy to get discouraged when you think about how much more you still need to learn. But here's a little secret. It's the small wins, the little steps, that matter most. Imagine you're climbing a mountain. Each step you take brings you closer to the top. But if you look at the whole mountain, it can feel overwhelming. Instead of thinking about how high the mountain is, focus on the next step. Similarly, in learning English, instead of focusing on everything you need to learn, focus on the small victories, like remembering a new word, understanding a sentence in a podcast, or finishing a chapter in a book. These small wins will give you the confidence to keep going. I have a friend named Daniel who really struggled with motivation early on in his English learning journey. He would set huge goals like, I want to be fluent in 3 months. Of course, that's an ambitious goal, but it didn't work for him because it was too big to feel achievable in the short term. Instead of feeling excited, Daniel felt frustrated when he didn't reach his goal as quickly as he wanted. One day, he decided to change his approach. Instead of focusing on fluency in 3 months, he set small, specific goals. 1 week, his goal was to learn 10 new words. The next week, he practiced listening to a podcast for 20 minutes every day. These small, bite-sized goals were so much easier for him to focus on. And guess what? After a few months, Daniel started feeling more fluent, and the small wins had added up to a bigger goal. Now, let's talk about something that I find really helps learners stay motivated: connecting your English learning with real-life situations. If you only study English in a classroom or by reading textbooks, it can sometimes feel disconnected from the real world. But when you start using English in your everyday life, it becomes much more relevant and motivating. I have a story about a student named Sarah who wanted to improve her English for work. Sarah worked in a marketing company, but her English skills were holding her back from communicating effectively with her international clients. She was always nervous about speaking, especially in meetings. One day, Sarah made a decision. She would start using English in her daily life at work. She began by writing her emails in English, and even though it felt a little uncomfortable at first, she kept practicing. Slowly, she became more confident. Then she started speaking with her colleagues in English, asking questions during meetings. At first, Sarah's English wasn't perfect, but over time, her fluency improved, and the best part was that Sarah could now see the immediate impact of her learning. The more she practiced English in real-world situations, the more motivated she became to continue learning. This brings me to another tip. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. Many English learners are scared of making mistakes when they speak, and that fear can prevent them from even trying. But here's the truth. Making mistakes is part of the learning process. It's how you learn what works and what doesn't. I'll tell you a funny story about my friend Tom. Tom was studying English for a year, and he was very shy about speaking because he was afraid of making mistakes. One day, he was at a party, and a friend asked him a simple question. "How's the weather today?" Tom, a little nervous, replied, "It's very sunny and warm, I think." The problem was he meant to say, "I think it's sunny," but he accidentally mixed up the sentence. His friend laughed and said, "I love how you said that. It's like you were guessing the weather." Tom felt embarrassed at first, but then everyone started laughing with him, and he realized that making mistakes was not the end of the world. The more he spoke, the more comfortable he became with making mistakes and learning from them. If you're nervous about making mistakes, just remember that they are a sign you're trying. And guess what? Most people, especially native speakers, are happy to help you improve. I've noticed that people are usually very understanding when they know you're learning English. They'll appreciate your effort, and this will encourage you to keep practicing. Another important aspect of staying motivated is creating a support system. Sometimes learning English can feel lonely, especially when you're doing it on your own. That's why it's crucial to find a community of learners or even a study partner. I have a story about a student named Michael who struggled with staying motivated until he found a language partner. Michael was studying English for months, but he found it hard to stay motivated on his own. He often felt isolated in his learning journey. But one day, Michael joined an online group of English learners. The group met twice a week, and they would practice speaking English with each other. Having a partner to practice with made a huge difference for Michael. He felt accountable to his partner, and their conversations helped him improve his speaking skills quickly. Having someone to practice with was not only motivating for Michael, but it also made learning English more fun. You can find support in many places. There are online forums, Facebook groups, or even apps where you can connect with other English learners. You don't have to learn alone. And even if you don't have a partner, talking to yourself in English can also be helpful. It might feel strange at first, but speaking out loud, even to yourself, helps you practice forming sentences and improves your fluency. Let's also talk about setting realistic goals. While it's great to aim for fluency, sometimes we set goals that are too big and unrealistic, which can lead to burnout. Instead of thinking, I want to be fluent in English, set smaller, more achievable goals. For example, you could set a goal to learn 20 new words in a week, or to watch one English video every day for the next month. When you set these smaller goals, it becomes much easier to stay motivated. You'll feel like you're making progress every day. And when you achieve your goal, celebrate it, whether it's a high five to yourself or sharing it with a friend. Acknowledging your achievements keeps you going. One of my friends, James, decided to set a goal of reading one book in English each month. At first, he struggled to finish the books. But over time, he built up a reading habit, and by the end of the year, James had read 12 books in English. Each book he read improved his vocabulary, grammar, and overall fluency. By focusing on small, achievable goals, James was able to stay motivated and made great progress. Another great way to stay motivated is to track your progress. It's easy to feel like you're not getting anywhere if you don't keep track of how far you've come. Try keeping a journal of your language learning journey. Write about the new words you've learned, the conversations you've had, and the improvements you've noticed in your listening or speaking skills. You could also keep a checklist of things you want to learn, and when you check something off, you'll feel a sense of accomplishment. Tracking your progress not only shows you how much you've learned, but also helps you stay motivated to keep going. When you look back at where you started, you'll realize just how far you've come. So let's recap some of the key points we've discussed today. First, remember that staying motivated is all about setting small, achievable goals and celebrating your wins. Second, try to use English in real-life situations to make your learning more relevant. Third, don't be afraid of making mistakes. Learn from them. Fourth, find a community or study partner to support you on your journey. Fifth, set realistic goals and track your progress. And finally, enjoy the process of learning. It's not just about the destination, it's about the journey itself. By following these tips and staying consistent, you will improve your fluency and confidence in English. Keep pushing yourself, and don't forget that every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goal. Let's keep learning and keep improving together. Let's continue this motivational journey of learning English focusing on building a deep connection with the language and understanding the best ways to stay engaged as you improve. There's one thing I always remind myself about when learning anything new. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Whether you're working to improve your speaking, listening, or writing skills, the key is to enjoy the process and understand that each step you take moves you closer to fluency. One of the most powerful motivators is understanding your why. Why are you learning English? For some people, it might be to get a better job or to move to an English-speaking country. For others, it could be to connect with new people, make friends, or even enjoy English language books and movies. Let's take the example of a friend named Emily. Emily decided to learn English because she wanted to move to the United States to work in marketing. She realized that being fluent in English would help her communicate with her colleagues, clients, and even understand marketing materials better. Every time Emily felt stuck or frustrated, she would remind herself why she started this journey in the first place. This constant reminder kept her motivated, even on tough days when she felt like giving up. It's also helpful to set clear, specific goals that match your why. These goals can guide your learning and give you something to look forward to. One way to set effective goals is by breaking them down into smaller, manageable tasks. For example, if you want to improve your speaking skills, you could set a goal to have a 10-minute conversation in English every day. At first, it might feel difficult, but by gradually increasing the time and speaking more often, you'll find that your fluency improves steadily. Consider Jack, who wanted to become more comfortable speaking English with his colleagues at work. Instead of aiming to speak perfectly, he set a goal of having short conversations every day. He started by talking to one colleague during lunch for 5 minutes, then increased it to 10 minutes. Jack was amazed at how quickly he grew in confidence and fluency. As he practiced daily, he noticed he was less nervous about speaking, and his vocabulary and sentence structure started to flow more naturally. One of the reasons why setting smaller, actionable goals work so well is that it gives you a clear path forward. It's very easy to get distracted or feel overwhelmed by the vast amount of information you need to learn in English. So instead of thinking about everything at once, break it into chunks that are easier to handle. Start with something simple, like learning a few new vocabulary words each day, and build on that success. This method will help you keep track of your progress, making learning feel less daunting. Let me share a story about a student named Olivia. Olivia was studying English for a few years, but felt stuck when it came to improving her fluency. She wasn't sure how to go from a beginner intermediate level to feeling confident in real-life conversations. She decided to set a goal. She would speak English every day, even if it was just for 5 minutes. Over time, Olivia's goal evolved to 15 minutes a day and then 30 minutes. She even started having small conversations with strangers in English just to practice. These mini goals helped Olivia overcome her fear of speaking, and within a year, she was able to speak comfortably with her friends and colleagues. Another critical element of staying motivated is the practice of consistency. It's easy to get excited about learning a new language and make a lot of progress in the beginning. But as time goes on, things can slow down, and the excitement may fade. That's when consistency becomes key. Learning a language is not about doing everything at once. It's about consistently doing a little bit each day. Even if it's just 15 minutes of listening to an English podcast or reading a short article, regular practice is what will lead to long-term improvement. One of my students, David, learned this lesson the hard way. He would study for hours on the weekend but didn't practice during the week. At first, he made good progress, but then his improvement started to plateau. After discussing this with his teacher, David realized that daily practice, even if it was just for a short amount of time, would help him more than cramming all his learning into one day. He started practicing English every day for at least 30 minutes. By spreading his learning over time, David noticed significant improvements in his listening and speaking skills. His conversations became more fluent, and his understanding of English grew deeper. Now, let's talk about the power of listening and speaking regularly, especially when it comes to practicing English in real-world situations. Many learners focus on reading and writing, but listening and speaking are often just as important, if not more so, in developing fluency. The more you listen to English, the better your brain becomes at recognizing sentence structures, vocabulary, and even the rhythm and tone of the language. When you listen to native speakers, whether it's through podcasts, conversations, or even audiobooks, you start to hear how the language is naturally spoken. You'll notice common phrases, slang, and different ways of expressing ideas. For example, let's say you're listening to a conversation between two friends. You might hear phrases like, "What's up?" or "How's it going?" These are everyday ways people greet each other in casual English. If you only learn formal English from a textbook, you might miss these natural expressions. But when you listen to real conversations, one of my friends, Alex, improved his listening and speaking skills by dedicating time to listening to English podcasts. He started by listening to shorter podcasts, and as his skills improved, he worked his way up to longer ones. Listening to different types of content, whether it's news, casual conversations, or stories, helped him recognize the different styles of speaking in English. Eventually, Alex started to mimic what he heard in podcasts, practicing the natural flow of speech. This not only improved his listening, but also made him sound more fluent when speaking. Now let's consider another example of someone staying motivated by connecting English with their passion. This can be a game changer for your language learning journey. Find something you genuinely enjoy and incorporate it into your learning process. Whether it's reading books, watching cooking tutorials, or following a fitness channel, using English in the context of your interests makes it much more enjoyable and practical. Take John, for example. John loved cooking, and he wanted to improve his English so that he could follow recipes and cooking videos online. Instead of learning random vocabulary, he started to focus on words related to cooking. He watched English language cooking shows, followed English recipes, and started experimenting in the kitchen. John even joined online cooking forums where he could practice speaking English while discussing recipes with other cooking enthusiasts. Not only did his English improve, but he also had a great time learning and practicing every day. Finally, let's talk about the importance of patience in the language learning process. It's very easy to get discouraged when you don't see immediate results, especially with something as complex as English. But remember, language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. Every time you practice, even for just a few minutes, you are getting closer to your goal. A great example is Michael, who was very dedicated to learning English but often felt frustrated when his progress seemed slow. He wanted to be fluent as quickly as possible, but he soon realized that language learning takes time. Michael's teacher encouraged him to be patient and to trust the process. Eventually, Michael saw that the little improvements he made every day added up. His speaking and listening skills gradually improved, and with time, he became much more confident in his abilities. In conclusion, the key to staying motivated while learning English is to make your journey enjoyable, set realistic goals, track your progress, and always remind yourself of your why. Practice regularly, embrace your mistakes, and keep pushing forward. Whether you're talking to a friend, reading a book, or listening to a podcast, every step you take is an important part of your English learning journey. And remember, you're not alone. There's a whole community of learners out there who are just as dedicated as you are. Let's dive deeper into the journey of staying motivated while learning English and explore how you can make this process not just easier, but even more rewarding. Learning English is like training for a marathon, not a sprint. It's important to pace yourself, set realistic goals, and stay focused on your progress. When you encounter challenges, remember that setbacks are part of the process. These challenges provide opportunities for growth and deeper understanding. The key is not to quit, but to keep moving forward step by step. To give you a practical example of how powerful motivation can be, let me share the story of my friend Mark. Mark was working in an international company and wanted to improve his English for career advancement. However, like many learners, he struggled with staying motivated after the first few months of his learning journey. Mark found it difficult to keep up with the language learning routine. He was tired of memorizing lists of vocabulary and grammar, rules, and he didn't feel like he was improving much, despite his efforts. One day, Mark decided to change his approach. Instead of just focusing on traditional learning, he began integrating English into his everyday life. He started by setting smaller, more achievable goals. His first goal was simple: to learn 5 new words related to his job every week. He wrote them down, made flashcards, and used them in his daily conversations with colleagues. This small change in his routine made a huge difference. Not only did he start using more relevant vocabulary, but he also felt more confident at work. Mark then moved on to the next step in his journey: listening. Instead of reading articles and books, he started listening to English podcasts that were related to his field. He was particularly interested in business English podcasts, where he could hear how professionals in his industry use the language. This new habit gave him real-world exposure to the language, making it feel more practical and less abstract. The more he listened, the more he started picking up new phrases and ways of expressing ideas. He could now understand his colleagues better, and his confidence when speaking in English grew exponentially. From Mark's story, we can see that motivation comes from connecting your learning to something meaningful. It could be your job, a personal goal, or even a hobby. The more personal and relevant your reason for learning, the more motivated you'll be to continue. Just like Mark, you can achieve progress by finding a learning strategy that feels enjoyable and connected to your goals. Let's now explore another powerful way to stay motivated: celebrating small wins. Often we think that we can only be proud of our progress when we reach a big milestone, like passing an exam or having a full conversation in English. But what about the smaller victories along the way? Maybe you understood a new phrase that you couldn't catch before, or you were able to write a short email in English without looking up too many words. These small achievements matter too, and they're the building blocks of fluency. Take Lucy, for example. Lucy was an intermediate learner of English who had been studying for a couple of years. At first, she struggled with listening comprehension. She would watch English language news and find herself lost in the first few minutes, missing key points. But instead of giving up, she celebrated small improvements. One day, she managed to understand an entire news segment about the weather. That might seem small, but for Lucy, it was a huge breakthrough. She acknowledged that achievement and felt a sense of accomplishment. This positive reinforcement motivated her to keep going. Every time she made progress, no matter how small, Lucy felt more confident and excited to continue her journey. In addition to celebrating small victories, it's also essential to stay curious and find new ways to engage with the language. When learning becomes repetitive or feels like a chore, it's easy to lose motivation. That's why it's important to switch things up and try new activities that challenge you in different ways. For example, if you're used to reading English books, try watching short videos or listening to podcasts in English. If you typically write essays, challenge yourself to write daily journal entries or even short stories in English. I remember when I was learning Spanish a few years ago. I found that writing long paragraphs in Spanish every day started to feel like a task rather than something fun. So I decided to switch things up and start listening to Spanish music. I would listen to songs I liked, then look up the lyrics, and translate them. It was an exciting way to connect with the language on a deeper level, and it kept my interest alive. I still remember the joy I felt when I learned a new word through a song. The process of learning became much more enjoyable, because I found ways to make it personal and fun. Another powerful tool to stay motivated is practicing with others. Having a study buddy or joining a language learning group can make a huge difference in how motivated you feel. When you practice with others, you get immediate feedback and encouragement, which helps you stay on track. This is especially helpful when you're feeling unsure or frustrated about your progress. Let's take Tom and Sarah as an example. Tom and Sarah were both learning English and decided to practice together. They would meet twice a week, each time bringing new phrases or sentences to discuss. At first, they were hesitant and nervous about making mistakes in front of each other. However, they quickly realized that the more they practiced together, the more they improved. They would laugh at their mistakes, correct each other, and share their learning experiences. Practicing together became a fun and supportive way for both of them to stay motivated. Not only did they improve their language skills, but they also became great friends. If you don't have a partner to practice with, consider joining online language exchange groups or finding a conversation partner on social media. There are many platforms where you can meet native speakers who are also learning your language, and you can help each other improve. It's a win-win situation, and it's a great way to stay motivated. Let's also talk about another important factor. In staying motivated, overcoming self-doubt. It's common for learners to doubt their abilities, especially when they feel like they're not improving as fast as they would like. But I want to remind you that self-doubt is normal. Every learner has experienced it, no matter how advanced they are. The key is not to let it stop you. When you feel like you're not making progress, take a moment to reflect on how far you've come. Look at the first day you started learning English and compare it to where you are now. Remember the story of Sarah, who struggled with speaking English fluently. She often felt nervous when trying to have conversations, worried that she would make a mistake. But instead of letting those fears control her, Sarah made a promise to herself that she would speak English every day, even if it was just for a few minutes. Over time, the more she practiced, the more confident she became. Sarah realized that the only way to overcome her doubts was to keep pushing forward, and that's exactly what she did. Eventually, she became comfortable speaking English with anyone, and her fluency improved beyond what she thought was possible. One final piece of advice for staying motivated is to be kind to yourself. Learning a new language is a long process, and it's easy to get frustrated with yourself when things don't go as planned. But don't forget that learning English is a journey, not a destination. There will be times when you feel stuck or discouraged, but that's okay. Be patient and give yourself credit for the effort you're putting in. Let's take the example of Anna, who had been learning English for a few years but still didn't feel completely fluent. At times, she was hard on herself, thinking she should have made more progress by now. But after some reflection, Anna realized that language learning isn't a race. She needed to enjoy the process and celebrate how far she had come. So, instead of focusing on what she hadn't achieved yet, Anna started to acknowledge the small successes she had along the way. This mindset shift helped her stay motivated and more positive about her learning journey. To wrap things up, learning English can sometimes feel like a tough road to walk, but it's also one of the most rewarding experiences you can have. Whether you're practicing with a friend, learning through a podcast, or setting small, realistic goals, the key is to keep moving forward. And don't forget, progress is progress, no matter how slow it seems. You're on the right path, and every step you take gets you closer to fluency. Let's go back to Tom and Sarah for a minute. I've already shared their story about how they practiced together, but let's look at how their motivation was tested and how they pushed through the tough times. After about 6 months of consistent study, they started to feel a little bored with the routine. They had been learning vocabulary, watching videos, and practicing grammar, but everything started to feel repetitive. It was at this point that they decided to switch things up. They didn't give up on English. Instead, they reimagined how they approached learning. Tom, who was always the more creative one, came up with an idea. Why not play some language games together? They found several apps and websites that allowed them to play vocabulary games and grammar quizzes. This small change made a huge difference. Not only did they get to test their knowledge in a fun way, but they also made the learning experience feel more dynamic and exciting. Sarah, on the other hand, decided to start writing short stories in English. She didn't worry about making them perfect, but focused on the process of expressing herself. She felt so proud when she finished her first story in English and shared it with Tom. It was these small changes that helped them rediscover their motivation. But motivation is not just about finding new ways to learn. It's about understanding that consistency is key. Learning a language is like building a muscle. The more you practice, the stronger you get. However, there will be times when you feel like you're not improving, even though you've been working hard. This is completely normal. There were times when Tom and Sarah felt like they were going backward. They would have moments where they couldn't remember a word they had learned just the day before. It was frustrating, and they questioned whether they were making any real progress. But they learned an important lesson. Even on days when they felt like they weren't improving, they were still moving forward. It might not have been noticeable at first, but their brains were absorbing the information. Every time they practiced, their confidence in speaking English grew, even if they didn't realize it in the moment. The key to their success was perseverance. They kept pushing through even when they didn't see immediate results. Let's look at another example of motivation. This time, let's talk about Emily. Emily had been learning English for a couple of years, and although she had a good understanding of grammar, she struggled with speaking. Every time she had to speak English, she felt nervous. She was afraid of making mistakes, so she often avoided speaking altogether. Emily wanted to get better, but she found it hard to motivate herself to speak out loud. One day, Emily had an important breakthrough. She realized that she was putting too much pressure on herself to speak perfectly. She decided to change her perspective. Instead of focusing on avoiding mistakes, she started to embrace them as part of the learning process. She made a plan to speak in English every day, even if it was just for 5 minutes. Emily found that when she practiced speaking with no pressure, she felt much more relaxed and confident. She would practice by describing her day, talking to herself about things she liked, and even practicing with her husband. Slowly but surely, she became more comfortable speaking English, and over time, her fluency improved significantly. What can we learn from Emily's story? It's essential to take the pressure off yourself and not be afraid of mistakes. The more you speak, the better you get. Every time you speak English, you're making progress, even if you don't feel perfect. Emily's willingness to embrace her mistakes allowed her to keep going, and that's a big part of staying motivated. Now, let's consider another important factor in staying motivated: the power of setting meaningful goals. Without clear goals, it's easy to lose direction and become discouraged. When you're not sure what you're working towards, it's difficult to stay focused. Setting specific, measurable goals is one of the best ways to keep yourself motivated throughout your learning journey. David, for example, had been studying English for over a year, but he struggled with finding the right goals. He knew he wanted to improve his speaking and listening skills, but he didn't have a clear plan. One day, he decided to create a detailed goal plan for himself. He wrote down exactly what he wanted to achieve: to be able to hold a 10-minute conversation with a native speaker without feeling nervous. He then broke down this big goal into smaller steps, such as learning 10 new vocabulary words every week, practicing pronunciation daily, and watching English language news to improve his listening skills. This structured approach gave David a clear path to follow and motivated him to keep working, knowing that each step brought him closer to his goal. With a clear plan in place, David started to make steady progress. Every time he hit one of his smaller goals, like learning the vocabulary or improving his pronunciation, he felt a sense of accomplishment. And when he finally had that 10-minute conversation with a native speaker without feeling nervous, it was a huge milestone for him. David's story teaches us that breaking down larger goals into smaller, achievable steps can provide us with a sense of direction and motivation. Another way to stay motivated is by making English a part of your daily routine, just like any other habit. If you're not actively practicing English every day, it can be hard to stay on track. But when you make it a consistent part of your life, even if it's just a few minutes each day, the progress you make adds up quickly. Take Michael, for example. Michael had a busy schedule and often found it hard to dedicate time to studying English. However, he made a simple yet powerful change. He committed to learning English during his daily commute. Every day he would listen to an English language podcast or audiobook while traveling to work. He started to notice that he was picking up more vocabulary and phrases, and his listening skills improved. Michael found that using his commute time for English practice helped him make consistent progress without having to sacrifice other parts of his life. His story shows us that integrating English into daily activities is a great way to stay motivated, especially when you don't have a lot of extra time. If you're like Michael, you don't need to set aside hours each day to study English. Instead, try integrating it into the small pockets of time you have throughout the day. Whether it's while you're commuting, doing chores around the house, or even waiting for your coffee to brew, you can listen to English content or practice a new skill. It might feel like a small effort, but these moments add up over time and you'll see significant improvements in your English. At this point, I want to emphasize how important it is to find your why. Why are you learning English? What's your motivation for improving? Your answer to this question will help you stay focused and energized, especially when the learning process feels challenging. It's easy to lose sight of your goal when things get tough, but by reminding yourself why you started in the first place, you can reignite your motivation. Let's revisit Sarah's story for a moment. Sarah had been learning English for a few years, but there were times when she felt discouraged. However, she kept reminding herself of why she started. Sarah's motivation was clear. She wanted to be able to communicate with her relatives who lived in the United States. Every time she faced a challenge, she would think about how happy she would be when she could finally have conversations with her family in English without feeling anxious. Her why helped her stay focused and motivated even on the hardest days. The takeaway from Sarah's experience is simple. By understanding the deeper purpose behind your learning, you can find the strength to push through difficult moments. Whether it's for career advancement, personal growth, or connecting with others, knowing your motivation will keep you moving forward. Staying motivated while learning English doesn't have to be a complicated task. By setting clear goals, practicing consistently, embracing mistakes, and finding personal meaning in the process, you can stay focused and continue making progress. And remember, even the smallest steps count. Keep pushing forward and you'll see how far you've come. Let's take a moment to focus on a very real part of the language learning journey: plateaus. You've probably experienced it yourself. You feel like you've reached a point where no matter how hard you try, your skills don't seem to improve as quickly as they did at the beginning. It's frustrating, right? But here's the good news. Plateaus are completely normal, and they don't mean that you're not making progress. Let's take the example of Jack and Emma. They had been studying English for several years, and by the time they reached the intermediate level, they both started to feel like their progress had slowed down. Jack had been practicing English for about 3 years, and Emma had been learning for almost the same amount of time. For a while, things were moving smoothly. They could easily read articles, have basic conversations, and understand a lot of what they heard. But suddenly, it felt like they were stuck in the same place. They couldn't improve their fluency, and they started to feel frustrated. One day, Jack called Emma to talk about how he was feeling. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm stuck," Jack said. "I can't seem to get past this level. I don't know if my English is improving anymore." Emma replied, "I know exactly how you feel. I've been feeling the same way. But I think we might be going through a plateau." "What's a plateau?" Jack asked, confused. Emma explained, "A plateau is when you reach a point where it feels like you're not making any progress, even though you're still working hard. It's a natural part of learning something new. But the key is not to give up. You've got to keep going, because this is the time when you're really strengthening your skills, even if you can't see it yet." Jack took Emma's advice to heart and decided to push through the plateau. He kept practicing, but instead of feeling discouraged, he focused on celebrating small wins. For instance, one week, he noticed that he understood more of the conversations around him. Another week, he could read articles in English faster and without needing to look up as many words. The plateau, though frustrating, helped Jack become more resilient. He didn't stop learning. He kept going, knowing that his progress would show itself in the future. This story teaches us that plateaus are just part of the process. It's easy to get discouraged when you feel like you've hit a wall, but the key is persistence. The best way to break through a plateau is to keep going and be patient with yourself. Trust that you are improving, even if the results aren't visible right away. Now let's focus on another powerful way to stay motivated: finding a supportive learning community. Learning English doesn't have to be a solo journey. Sometimes, the best way to stay motivated is to surround yourself with other people who are also learning and improving. Whether it's joining a language exchange group, attending an English class, or participating in an online community, being part of a group can boost your motivation and give you the encouragement you need to keep going. Let's look at Peter's story. Peter had been studying English for a couple of years but struggled with speaking. He was hesitant to talk to native speakers because he was afraid of making mistakes. He had no one to practice with, so he often felt alone in his learning journey. But one day, Peter decided to join an online English learning group. It was a small group of intermediate learners who met every week to practice speaking. At first, Peter was nervous. He didn't know if he'd be able to keep up with the conversations or if his English would be good enough. But when he joined the first meeting, something amazing happened. The group was incredibly supportive. Everyone encouraged each other, and no one judged anyone for making mistakes. Peter found that he was more confident in speaking than ever before. Even though his English wasn't perfect, the group helped him feel like he belonged. The more Peter participated in the group, the more his confidence grew. He started speaking more fluently, and soon he was able to hold longer conversations in English. By joining a supportive community, Peter found the motivation he needed to keep practicing, and his speaking skills improved dramatically. The lesson here is clear. Find a community to support your learning. Being part of a group can keep you motivated, and having others to practice with makes the journey a lot more enjoyable. You don't have to do it alone. Now let's talk about something that might surprise you. How can motivation be maintained by focusing on something outside of the language itself? It sounds strange, but sometimes the best way to stay motivated is by finding reasons to use English in your daily life, in ways that don't feel like studying. Take Laura, for example. Laura had been studying English for a while, but she struggled with maintaining her motivation. She would study for a few days, and then her enthusiasm would fade. She realized that her English studies often felt disconnected from her real life, and that made it harder for her to stay motivated. So, she decided to change her approach. Instead of focusing on textbooks and grammar exercises, she decided to learn English through something that truly excited her: cooking. Laura loved cooking, and she was especially interested in learning how to make traditional dishes from around the world. She found recipes in English and watched cooking tutorials in English. She learned cooking terminology, listened to instructions, and practiced reading and speaking in English while following the recipes. Not only did she improve her English, but she also discovered that learning through something she loved made the whole experience much more enjoyable. Laura's story shows us that motivation often comes from engaging with English in a way that fits our interests. By combining learning with something we're passionate about, we can stay motivated without the pressure of formal studying. Whether it's through cooking, traveling, reading about your hobbies, or engaging with something you enjoy, connecting English with your interests can help you stay motivated. Another strategy for maintaining motivation is to celebrate your progress, no matter how small. It's easy to get caught up in what you haven't achieved yet, but it's important to also recognize the things you've already accomplished. Each step forward is worth celebrating, even if it's something small. Take James as an example. James had been studying English for a while, and while he was making progress, he often felt like he wasn't achieving enough. He was too focused on what he couldn't do rather than what he had already accomplished. One day, a friend asked him, "James, have you ever looked at how far you've come since you started?" James took a moment to reflect. He remembered how difficult it was for him to understand simple English conversations when he first started. Now he could have detailed discussions in English and was able to read books in English without feeling overwhelmed. He realized that he had come a long way. From that day on, James made it a point to celebrate even the small achievements, whether it was reading a full article in English or understanding a movie without subtitles. This positive reinforcement helped him stay motivated. By celebrating small victories, James was able to remember, motivation isn't something that stays constant. It ebbs and flows. But the key is to keep pushing forward, even when your motivation feels low. By creating a routine, setting goals, finding your why, and celebrating your progress, you can stay motivated and continue to improve your English. Finally, just like Jack, Emma, Peter, Laura, and James, you can break through any obstacles that come your way. Every day you practice, even if it's just for a few minutes, you are moving closer to your goal. Keep going, stay patient with yourself, and trust that you are on the right path. One of the most powerful ways to stay motivated is by creating a vision of your future. Think about why you're learning English in the first place. What do you want to accomplish? Do you dream of traveling and being able to communicate with people from different cultures? Or maybe you want to advance in your career by improving your communication skills. Visualizing your goals can give you the energy you need to push through tough times. Take Michael's story, for example. Michael had always dreamed of traveling to the UK and experiencing British culture firsthand. He knew that English was key to making that dream a reality. However, as time went by, he found himself feeling stuck. The vocabulary seemed endless, and grammar rules started to blur together. He felt discouraged, and the dream of traveling to the UK seemed far away. But one day, he decided to stop focusing on the challenges and instead think about why he was learning English in the first place. He imagined himself in London, walking down the streets, speaking with locals, and exploring the sights. That vision reminded him of why he was working so hard, and it gave him the motivation to keep going. Every time Michael felt frustrated, he would think about his goal of visiting the UK, and that thought would reignite his passion for learning. This story teaches us an important lesson. Always keep your goals in mind. When things get tough, remembering why you started can give you the strength to continue. Whether it's traveling, finding a better job, or just being able to communicate more easily with English speakers, having a clear vision can help keep your motivation high. Now, let's discuss how you can make learning English feel more like a game. Gamification is a powerful technique that can turn studying into something fun and rewarding. Instead of seeing English learning as a series of tasks to complete, you can make it an exciting challenge. This approach helps you stay engaged and motivated because it adds an element of play to your studies. Let me tell you about Sophie, who struggled to stay motivated when learning English. She had tried everything: traditional lessons, online courses, and even private tutors, but nothing seemed to keep her excited. That's when she decided to try something new, gamifying her learning process. Sophie set small, achievable goals for herself, and every time she achieved one, she rewarded herself. For example, after learning 10 new vocabulary words, she treated herself to a coffee or a movie. After finishing a chapter in her textbook, she gave herself a small break to do something she enjoyed. Sophie also started using apps and websites that turned learning English into a game. She would compete against her friends to see who could answer the most questions correctly, or track her progress over time to see how much she had learned. This approach not only made learning more fun, but it also kept her motivated. By turning her English lessons into a game, Sophie made studying feel like a rewarding experience rather than a boring task. Gamification can work for you too. Whether you use apps, rewards, or challenge yourself to reach new milestones, turning your learning process into a game can make a big difference in keeping you engaged. Plus, when you see yourself improving and earning rewards, you'll feel more motivated to continue. Another great way to stay motivated is by celebrating progress, even in small amounts. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that you need to be perfect in English right away. But the truth is, improvement comes gradually, and every small step forward is an accomplishment. Celebrating these small victories is a powerful way to boost your motivation. Think about Robert, who had been working on his English for a year. He had made significant progress, but he was frustrated because he felt like his speaking skills hadn't improved as much as his listening or reading skills. One day, Robert realized that he was focusing too much on the areas where he hadn't yet reached his goal. He wasn't acknowledging the progress he had made in other areas. To change his mindset, Robert decided to start celebrating the small victories. For example, when he understood a podcast episode without subtitles, he gave himself a small reward. When he was able to have a conversation with his colleague in English without feeling nervous, he celebrated that as well. Slowly but surely, Robert began to recognize that his efforts were paying off. This shift in focus made a huge difference in his motivation. Instead of feeling discouraged by the areas he still needed to improve, Robert started feeling proud of what he had already achieved. Celebrating progress, no matter how small, gave him the boost he needed to keep pushing forward. This is a reminder that success in language learning doesn't always mean reaching a huge milestone. Sometimes it's the little moments that matter the most. Recognizing your progress, even in small steps, can keep you motivated and remind you that you're on the right path. Now, let's talk about something that might be a bit harder but equally important: developing a growth mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that your abilities can improve with effort, learning, and persistence. People with a growth mindset don't see challenges as obstacles, but as opportunities to grow. They understand that mistakes are part of the process and that they can learn from them. Take Thomas as an example. Thomas had always been a perfectionist. When he started learning English, he wanted everything to be perfect. If he made a mistake, he would feel embarrassed and discouraged. But over time, he realized that his fear of mistakes was holding him back. He was so focused on being perfect that he was afraid to take risks. One day, Thomas read about the importance of having a growth mindset. He learned that successful language learners embrace mistakes and see them as stepping stones to improvement. This idea clicked for him, and he decided to change his approach. Instead of avoiding situations where he might make mistakes, Thomas started actively looking for opportunities to practice, even if it meant making errors along the way. At first, it was difficult. Thomas still felt nervous when speaking in English, especially when he knew he might make a mistake. But over time, he became more comfortable with imperfection. He began to see mistakes not as failures, but as learning experiences. With this new mindset, his confidence grew, and his English improved faster than ever. Thomas's story teaches us that a growth mindset is essential to language learning. Instead of being afraid of mistakes, embrace them as part of the journey. The more you learn from your mistakes, the faster you'll improve. So whenever you make an error, don't get discouraged. Remember that every mistake is just another opportunity to learn. Finally, I want to emphasize the importance of taking care of yourself during the language learning process. It's easy to get caught up in studying and forget to take breaks or focus on other aspects of your well-being. However, maintaining a healthy balance between learning and relaxation is crucial for long-term success. If you don't take care of your mental and physical health, your motivation will eventually suffer. Sarah, for example, had been studying English nonstop for months. She spent hours every day listening to podcasts, reading books, and practicing speaking. At first, it felt great, but over time, she began to feel burned out. Her motivation was slipping, and she started to dread studying. One day, Sarah realized that she needed to make some changes. She began taking regular breaks during her study sessions, and she also started exercising to reduce stress. Additionally, Sarah made sure to get enough sleep each night and spent time doing things she enjoyed, like reading for fun or going for walks. As she focused more on her well-being, Sarah found that her motivation to learn English returned. By balancing study with self-care, she was able to continue improving without feeling overwhelmed. Sarah's story reminds us that taking care of yourself is just as important as taking care of your language studies. If you want to stay motivated and continue learning, don't forget to make time for relaxation and self-care. This balance will help you maintain your energy. 1. Start with your big why. One of the most important steps in staying motivated is understanding why you're learning English in the first place. Knowing your purpose can provide you with the drive to push through challenges, especially when things get tough. Let me tell you about Thomas. Thomas had always dreamed of traveling to the United States to explore New York City and experience American culture firsthand. He had seen movies, read books, and heard people speak English all around him. But as he began learning, he quickly found that it was hard to keep up. The grammar rules, the vast vocabulary, and the different accents were overwhelming. However, instead of giving up, Thomas kept his eyes on the prize. He remembered why he started learning English in the first place. The thought of walking around Times Square, ordering a coffee at a cafe in Brooklyn, and speaking with people from all over the world kept him motivated. Even on the days when studying felt like a chore, he thought about what it would be like to finally speak English confidently in New York, and that vision kept him going. He set smaller, achievable goals to help him stay focused, and little by little, his English improved. In the end, Thomas not only made his dream trip to New York a reality, but also gained the ability to connect with people from different cultures. So, whenever you feel discouraged or tired of studying, take a moment to think about your own why. Do you want to travel, build a career, or connect with English-speaking friends? Understanding your motivation can be a powerful tool in keeping your energy and focus strong. Create a daily habit. Consistency is key when it comes to language learning. It's easy to think that you need to spend hours each day practicing English, but in reality, short daily study sessions can be more effective than occasional long sessions. By creating a daily habit, you're not only reinforcing what you've learned, but you're also making English a natural part of your life. This approach is exactly what helped Lily, a university student from London. Lily had always struggled with consistency in her studies. She would sometimes spend entire weekends studying English, but would then forget about it for weeks. This inconsistency made her progress slow and frustrating. One day, Lily decided to try something different. Instead of long study sessions, she committed to spending just 15 minutes a day practicing English. She would listen to a podcast while having breakfast, review vocabulary before bed, and read short articles during her lunch breaks. By making these small moments part of her daily routine, English slowly became integrated into her day-to-day life. Over time, Lily found that this daily habit not only helped her retain more information, but also made her feel more confident in using English every day. Creating a routine doesn't mean you have to dedicate hours of your time. Even short, consistent practice sessions can build up to significant improvement. Plus, these mini sessions will make studying feel less overwhelming. Celebrate small wins. Sometimes we get so focused on our ultimate goals that we forget to celebrate the progress we're making along the way. It's important to recognize every step, no matter how small. Take Jake's story, for example. Jake had been learning English for several months but was feeling frustrated because he still couldn't speak as fluently as he wanted. One day, after finishing an online listening practice, Jake realized that he had understood everything without needing to pause the audio or look up words. He had reached a milestone. Although it didn't seem like much, Jake recognized it as an achievement. He treated himself to a movie in English and enjoyed a relaxing evening, proud of the progress he had made by celebrating small victories like understanding a difficult podcast, having a short conversation in English, or learning 5 new vocabulary words. You remind yourself that progress is happening. These little celebrations create positive reinforcement, and they'll help keep you motivated. Find a study buddy or join a group. Learning with others can be a great way to stay motivated. Having someone to practice with keeps you accountable and provides you with the support you need when things get tough. This is exactly what helped Emma, who had been struggling with her English pronunciation. She decided to join an English study group in her local community. At first, she was nervous about speaking in front of others, but the more she practiced, the more confident she became. She learned new vocabulary from her group members and received helpful feedback on her pronunciation. Emma's experience shows us how powerful a study buddy or group can be. Whether it's a friend, a language partner, or a group of learners, practicing with others can be incredibly motivating. You'll not only learn from their strengths, but you'll also get valuable feedback on your own areas for improvement. Plus, having someone to celebrate your wins with makes the learning process more enjoyable. 5. Use fun tools and resources. Sometimes studying English can feel like a chore, especially when you're focused on textbook exercises and grammar rules. To keep yourself motivated, it's important to find fun and engaging ways to practice English. Let me tell you about Sophie, who made learning English much more exciting by using apps, games, and media. Sophie was a beginner, so she started using language learning apps that turned lessons into interactive games. She would play vocabulary games, listen to short dialogues, and complete quizzes, all while earning points and unlocking new levels. She also started watching English TV shows with subtitles, and eventually, she felt confident enough to watch without subtitles. By using these fun tools and resources, Sophie was able to keep herself motivated while learning. She wasn't just memorizing vocabulary. She was actively engaging with the language in ways that felt natural and enjoyable. If you're struggling to stay motivated, try finding creative ways to make your learning fun. There are plenty of apps, websites, and online games designed to make studying English feel like a game. This way, you're not just learning, you're having fun too. Focus on communication, not perfection. One of the biggest mistakes many learners make is focusing too much on getting everything perfect. It's easy to get caught up in grammar rules and pronunciation, but if you only focus on perfection, you might miss out on real-life practice. Sarah's story can help illustrate this point. Sarah had been practicing English for years and had a good grasp of grammar and vocabulary. However, she was often afraid to speak because she was worried about making mistakes. One day, Sarah decided to challenge herself. Instead of focusing on speaking perfectly, she simply started conversations with her friends and colleagues in English. She found that, even though her grammar wasn't perfect, people still understood her and appreciated her efforts. By shifting her focus to communication instead of perfection, Sarah became much more confident in speaking. She realized that making mistakes was part of the learning process, and that being able to communicate effectively was more important than speaking perfectly. So, if you're worried about making mistakes, Remember that the goal of learning a language is to communicate. Don't be afraid to speak, even if it's not perfect. The more you speak, the better you'll get. 7. Be patient and don't give up. Finally, one of the most important things to remember on your English learning journey is that progress takes time. This isn't something that will happen overnight, but with patience and dedication, you'll continue to improve. Let's talk about George, who started learning English at age 40. At first, he felt discouraged because he was older than most learners in his class. He also struggled with memorizing new words and understanding the grammar, rules. But George didn't give up. Instead of getting discouraged, he kept practicing day by day. After a few months, he noticed that he could understand more TV shows, read books in English, and even have short conversations without feeling nervous. The process was slow, but over time, George made significant progress. George's story shows that language learning is a journey, not a race. Even if it feels slow at times, don't give up. Keep practicing and you'll see results. Patience and persistence will eventually pay off, and the effort you put in today will lead to bigger rewards in the future.